Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 46. We are live here at the National Farm Machinery Show. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening in our experiences at the Farm Machinery Show. But before we get started, Josh, I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering here at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky with my husband. It's a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering as well. Where in my personal life, I focus on raising hay production and raising registered Angus cattle and goats.
Okay, Josh. So before we get started on the Farm Machinery Show, which has been a pretty exciting week here, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening on the farms this week.
So, this past weekend's a pretty good weekend. We went ahead and put out a lot of hay that we could, moved some hay home. And then also, I guess this past week, we had a little bit of a challenge to the cows while we were at farm. Well, at farm, prior to going to farm show, had some cows getting out. So making sure we shut gates and had a fair number of, inspections, a fair number of limbs that we had a lot of weather events, limbs that were on the fence lines.
Yeah, we too had to clean up some fence lines. We also we sold our calves.
Oh, okay. How'd that go?
We sold them well. They went for a fairly decent price. It was a decent week to sell. Glad to have them gone, only in the sense that it's less animals to feed. Other than that, we've been feeding hay, typically. It's been a dry week. It's finally rained. Today is Friday. It's a little bit late for us to do the recording in the week, but we had rain earlier this week, and up until then, we'd had a lot of hay we were able to put out, unroll, and move it around in the field a little bit, rather than feeding it always on the feed pads.
Yeah, we actually got about 2 inches of rain the other night.
Yeah, we had pretty heavy rain on Wednesday night into Thursday. I know they were calling for an inch, but I think an inch was a significant underestimation of the total rainfall we had. So
yeah.
Now we're back to feeding on the feed pads and using concrete to its full advantage.
Yes.
So while we're here at National Farm Machinery Show, let's just take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that we saw, some of the things that we enjoyed, and a little bit about the booth.
So we got a couple things. For me, having the drone interest, I've seen at least 5 large sprayer drones. So there seems to be a lot of interest, it seems, this year in sprayer drones, and I think they're being larger size, gaining popularity, and especially for this region and I guess surrounding states potentially. Just the smaller, regular size fields and smaller areas, I think they can be popular. But even for some of the larger farms, they can be popular.
Yeah, I think I've also seen a lot of technology here. I'm not so focused on drones, so that's not typically the area. But I saw different camera systems. Saw some newer technologies, even on the construction side, for building design components, different components for different attachment types, for connections, which are kind of interesting. And then, of course, some of the standard things that I always like to look at. Handling facilities are a big one for me. I like to see all of the handling facilities, see what changes they've made. There's some tried and true, and there's always someone that's tweaked something a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, I was looking at from a handling facility standpoint, I was looking at some of the goat and sheep handling facilities. Mm-hmm. And so not necessarily and also the feeding, how they're feeding them. So there was one where they had a bale feeder, but that had a step up for them to actually, so they don't get up in there, but they're actually able to get underneath it a little easier.
That's interesting. Yeah, I actually looked at a couple smaller goat and small ruminant feeders that were cone shaped. Yeah. But actually not necessarily for a round bale, because a round bale is maybe too big for them to reach to the center of. And so that was also kind of interesting. So I'm still investigating that, but I thought there were some pretty interesting designs out there. Different price points, of course.
Lots of different price points. Yeah.
So some of the handling facilities and the cattle feeding and the small ruminant feeding were pretty interesting. There were some newer round bale feeder designs out there. So since we just touched on them a few weeks ago, I was looking at all of them very closely, eyeing them up, trying to decide if they were worth the extra money.
What about it? Yay or nay?
I don't know. I would probably test one. I don't know that I think I would gain enough value
Okay.
I don't personally like ring feeding enough of the time to justify that cost. If that was my only feeding strategy, I might invest more money in higher end ring feeders. But I only use them occasionally and for smaller groups.
Okay.
And I use some fence line feeders and some other things. And a traditional ring I can break down into a fence line feeder. These fancier ones I cannot break down into a fence line feeder. So it's a little bit trickier. That maybe wouldn't be my first
choice. And we currently put out our goat hay with we put it out in the ring, well, not the ring, I guess the cone. And so we actually go out there with them. So we don't have any fence line feeders for hay per se for the goats yet, but we have thought about it because it is almost a 2-man job where you have to have somebody watching the gate with all the goats there. But they do, at this point we have enough small goats that they can actually, or enough yearlings, I guess, that they can actually make a dent in a bale quite handily.
That makes sense. So I just curious because this was the first year I've brought my little ones with me.
Yep.
You brought little ones with you as well to the show. How did they do, and what did you think about bringing them to the show?
Well, I brought them, because I know they're going to enjoy it. I enjoyed it as a kid, and so part of it was just when you bring them here, you know that they're going to want to touch and grab everything, so you just keep track of them. I should have brought an iPad or
An iPod?
iPad, the little like air tag.
Yep.
So keep track of them. Because sometimes they go off on like random tangents. You'll be walking straight, then all of a sudden they'll make a 90-degree turn. They'll see something that catches their attention, and they'll just go for it. So a lot of it, they have a lot of fun. I still have a lot of fun, getting up in tractors, and it's a good experience for them. So I actually enjoy taking my kids here and just letting them just have fun with the equipment.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think seeing their eyes light up is really interesting, and part of farming is it's a culture, and you're trying to instill it in young ones, and this is a really good spot for them to really get to enjoy and also see what's available. We don't crop farm at all, but my son is absolutely fascinated with combines.
Oh yeah,
and that's not something that he's ever going to see on our farm.
Yeah.
It's just not a priority for us on our operation. It's not something we ever want to be in as crops.
Yeah.
No offense to people that are in crops. It's just for the cost, and
it's a whole different shift. You already have the hay equipment, and so it's a whole nother enterprise.
It's a different enterprise, and not one that we're looking to invest in any point in the near future. But for him being able to see a combine, to see a header, to climb up in something like that, or a large seeder, a large drill. Seed drill, those things are just, and at the scale here, it's just really amazing. And I think for anyone, it's really fascinating. But for little kids that already see a lot of equipment, their eyes still grow huge at the size of some of the equipment here.
At the size of some of these combines and everything at the balers, and so he knows what we have. He's like, oh, there's our baler, there's our this and this. So then he sees the other equipment. He's like, wow, that's like you said, huge. And so they get a real big, they like the big trucks, and that they're very tactile. So they have to touch it, have to get up there in the cab and bounce around. And some of these cabs and these newer tractors, I think about my old 8600, where it's got that seat that it's got a 2x4 or something underneath it. It's kind of wobbles a little bit, and you get in this air ride, and man, that's nice. Some of those newer cabs and the conveniences.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And as someone who has no cab on any tractor, only open stations, I look at them and I'm like, can you imagine what life would be like if I had this kind of equipment? And even when I'm there, I get to dream a little bit when I see some of that bigger equipment. I mean, I'm not ready to go spend that kind of money today, or probably ever, but it is really exciting to get to see some of those things. So
then you think about, I know that in some of the past year, they had the completely autonomous tractors here, Case IH and different ones had the autonomous, and you think about that in the future, what's it going to take, and where's it going to go in the future? And so the precision ag aspects, they also excite me from just a precision ag standpoint as well.
Yeah. And there was actually, I think, 1 or 2 companies here that had fully electric tractors here this year. And, that's something that I don't think the market is ready for yet. And I don't know that there was a lot of value in the ones that I saw. Like, I'm not going out to buy them. I'm not trying to discourage those companies. But there was not enough benefit there for me to think that was a worthwhile investment. But it means it's coming. The fact that you see it here means that people are really seriously looking at electric as an option in the same way that they're looking at electric as an option on big trucks. They're looking at electric as an option on that. And good, bad, or otherwise, however you feel about it, it's very interesting to see.
Yep. I mean, there's going to be there's definitely some challenges, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for some ag engineers in the machine system side to help optimize, efficient battery use and how they achieve productivity throughout the day with these electric tractors. I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I'll say that I saw here that it's the subcompact and the compact tractors, the small acreage tractors that are available. The number of them and the styles on them just have exploded in the last few years.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people here who are shopping for them. People that own 5 acres or 10 acres of land.
Yep.
And it's also amazing to see what capacities they have and how they've modified larger tractors to make them fit for these, what I would call small acreages.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And so I think must be where the market is at this point. I think with a lot of people come about after pandemic, post-pandemic, maybe a smaller farm or trying to get away from the city.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote-unquote simpler life, potentially. Quote-unquote.
Simpler life with lots of work associated.
With lots of work, yeah. Lots of work and time investment.
Yeah, but I think that's probably a pretty good overview of the show and what we saw overall at the show this year. The booth this year is really well done. So if anyone hasn't made it out yet and is coming out to the show, we'd welcome you guys stopping by our booth here in the West Wing. Josh has a really nice display about sprayer drones, things that we've already talked about on a previous episode.
Yep.
Our quarter scale pulling tractor from last year is set up here for people to take a look at. And then we also have some traditional fertilizer spray
coverage calculator.
Coverage calculators.
So make sure you're not over applying and you're really calibrating that spreader.
Yeah.
Whether for seed or fertilizer.
Man, with prices right now, I don't know anyone that wants to over apply. So I think that's probably a pretty good thing.
Yeah, when things triple, in essence, triple over the past couple of years, it definitely shifts how you're going to apply that chemical.
Absolutely. And last but not least, you have up Chuck, who is a replica of a Holstein calf.
And he's getting scanned with LiDAR. So some of the drone work we've done with the cows in field, just showing it, demonstrating here today, just showing how we calculate a volume or create a 3D volume, even here at the farm show, of a calf.
Yeah, and it's pretty impressive. I think the young ones are really appreciating it.
Oh, yeah. All the kids love Chuck, and he's spinning around on essentially a Lazy Susan, but a motorized Lazy Susan.
Yep. And so I think that's a pretty good overview of what's happening this year at the farm show.
Oh.
Before we jump off, you want to give anyone a highlight of what you're hoping to get done before next week?
I guess the highlight would be, we're going to try to potentially, there's talk of weaning calves this weekend, so
wow.
that might happen. And so if we do end up weaning calves this weekend, I'll be here at farm show, but some other people are there at home, so my other brothers. And so they might be weaning some calves and then just taking care of whatever. We have to make sure they got plenty of really good hay and really good grain in front of them so they can transition fairly easily and then start with our cows. We have them separated as 2 herds, but combine those 2 herds, the cows and heifers, and let them go for, still get a decent quality hay, but still, maintain condition. How about you, Morgan?
Yeah, we're going to work on a couple things, but the primary thing is we've been in a house that doesn't have a fenced-in yard for our dogs. And so we got posts in the ground this past week, so we're going to be putting up that fence, the perimeter fence with the neighbor, so that the dogs are enclosed. Hopefully that will, give us back at least an hour a day of walking the dogs on leash.
Okay.
So hopefully long-term, that's a farming time-saving measure, building this fence. It seems silly to build a yard fence, but we were very fortunate before this rain came in. We got those posts driven, so getting that done. Our calves will stay on a couple more weeks. We're still figuring out exactly when they're going to come out. Ideally, they're coming out at the same time that we will do pregnancy check on our cows, because our bull came out in late January, so we're hoping we can wait till that 60-day mark and then pull and
draw blood, and do it all at
one time. So
okay.
So we'll be feeding hay, doing the typical weekly rounds,
maintenance,
delivery of hay, all of those things, and then building a fence this week. So
okay, staying busy still.
Never an end in sight, Josh. So with that, we'll see you guys next week with another new podcast.
All right, take care, everybody.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.